come here in Genesis chapter 42, and we're going to begin here when Joseph's brothers came to Egypt. And here it begins in Genesis chapter 42. And it says in verse 1, it says, "And now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do ye look upon each other? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die." And here you say whatever you can say about Jacob. He has been a man of action throughout his life. He has been up and going and moving from one place to another. And he's also a very hard-working man, and he's a go-getter. He's one of the person you can say that he's a go-getter. He's like to get things done, and he has been able to work throughout his life, and work for his sweetheart, who is Rachel, and for over 14 years, and then work for another 7 years to earn, the respect of his uncle Laban. But here, this man is now an old man, and he's crippled, and now he cannot barely walk. And here he said to his sons, he says, this is the only time that he can only send his sons. And he said, why do you stand around looking at each other? Why don't you just go to Egypt? You see? And now he said that he heard, by his faith or by words, people spoken that there's corn in Egypt. See? Says now he tells them to arise and go to Egypt, speaking to his sons rather than just standing there and waiting so they can eat and live and not die. So it begins here when he says that in verse 3, and he says, "And Joseph's brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief before him." Now, he went out here and he sends out his 10 brothers, and they went down to Egypt. And these are the 10 brothers that were not from Rachel, of course, from the other concubine and from Leah's sons. Now, you see that this man is now becoming, having to make favorite. And Benjamin is now, Jacob's favorite. He started before with Joseph, but now Joseph is gone. Now this man is now going to favor this child called Benjamin, because this child came from Rachel, his sweetheart who passed. And so he was very reluctant to send Benjamin with them, so he kept them with him. Apparently Jacob did not trust his sons, other sons with Benjamin, because seeing what transpired with Joseph in the past, because the last time he sent Joseph with them, Joseph never came back. And now he's very reluctant to send Benjamin to go with the brethren, because he said that some kind of mischief might befall him on him, and he will not come back. So here he plays favorite here. Again, in verse 5, moving on, it says, "And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan." Now you see the famine has now reached Canaan. It permeates all throughout and is spread out. Now he has now entered the land of Canaanites, and then now you see the sons of Israel. Now it mentions here that they are when they are going to go down to buy food in Egypt. And then it says here in in verse 6, and Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Now, you see now, Joseph's brethren came now and they bowed their heads. And this is part of one of the fulfilling of Joseph's dream. Remember when Joseph was 17-year old, he dreamed about his brothers will bow down to him. But now, these dreams here is being fulfilled. And it says that, and Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. You see, now Joseph here, he knew his brother. He's seen them. He recognizes them, but they did not recognize him. And some might say, why? Aren't there brothers? Can't you recognize your own brother? Well, one thing you have to understand that there's 20 years that has been removed from them. Joseph is now 37 years old at this time, and he's been, he's clean shaven, and he has been decked with this Egyptian robe and a robe of clothing. And also his voices might have changed. He has changed his voice, because when you are a teenager, it's a different voice when you become a man, and the voice changes throughout. And then here, but most certainly was the expectation of from a slave to a governor is not in their wildest dream. They don't have that expectation that somebody, like Joseph, who they sold, could also, turn around and become a governor. And they probably thought he was dead at this point. So here, his brothers their expectation that Joseph will be a governor is beyond their wildest dreams. And here you see in verse 8, it says, And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them. See, he noticed that the dream he had of his brothers were that one day they're going to come and bow down to him. Now this one is being fulfilled, and Joseph knew it privately. And he says, And then he said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. Now again, Joseph remembered this dream. The dream he remembered was the sheaf that was bowing down to his. Their sheaf that was bowing down. But he accused them of being spies, and in order to extract some kind of information from them. Obviously they weren't spies, but Joseph is now trying to learn more about his brothers. And then it continues, it says, and in verse 10 it says, And they said unto him, Nay, my Lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. Thy servants are no spies. And he said unto them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. See, they are saying that they are not spies. They came from one man's sons, and they came to buy food. But then here Joseph again accuses them more concerning them being spies in order to extract information. And he says, And they said, Thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. And then here you see the 12 brethren now. They had 12 brethren. You see, they came 10, and now it says one of them is with the father, and another one is no more. And it says, And Joseph said unto them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved by the life of Pharaoh you shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Now, Joseph said that you are to prove yourself now. This is what I'm saying, that you are to prove yourself. And he did not trust his brothers, obviously, and he wants to make sure whether Benjamin is still alive. So he said that this is what I'm saying, that you have to prove yourself. And then here he says in verse 16, it says, Joseph continues, he says, send one of you and let him fetch your brother, and he shall be kept in prison, that your words be made proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely ye are spies. Now he says that he's going to send one, to go get the younger brother, so it can be proved that they're not spies. But he's going to keep the rest of them in prison, and he's going to keep them until the one returns with the younger brother, which is Benjamin, to be proven. And then he says in verse 17, and he put them all together into the ward 3 days. And Joseph said unto them the third day, this do and live, for I fear God. So he comes here and put them in jail, and they spend time in jail for quite some time, like 3 days. And then Joseph now changes his mind. He says that I fear God. Now he's gonna say, he's gonna give them another alternative. He says, if ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye, carry corn for the famine of your house. But bring your youngest brother unto me, so shall your words be verified, and ye shall not die. And they did so. See, he says, go and take corn, but I will keep one here. I will hold one here, and bring the youngest one. Bring Benjamin back, so your words will be valid. See, now Joseph is now trying to hold them, accountable to their words now. And then it says in verse 21, it says, and they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we will not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. See, these people, his brethren, did not know that Joseph can hear them. Joseph could hear what they are saying, because these were speaking in Hebrew. These were speaking in Hebrew, and Joseph could hear exactly what they are saying. So, here they felt a little bit guilty. They felt a little that they need to confess themselves. And in verse 21 it says, and they said to one another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother. See, they were guilty. They were filled with guilt. And the confession here is that, this is what Joseph was looking for. This is what he meant. This was all these things he's trying to do also to get more information about them, for them to confess. And now these brothers are now confessing themselves and say, and later Joseph is gonna follow with Joseph's forgiveness. But here they are confessing what has happened, and they felt sorry, because this is brothers that is living all throughout their life in this guilt that happened. And then in verse 22 it says, and Reuben answered them, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child? And you will not hear. Therefore, behold, all this blood is required. Now, also his blood, it says, also his blood is required. Now, Reuben is speaking here in terms of God's law. See, his blood, speaking of Joseph's blood is required. You see, in Genesis verses 37-21, it says, Reuben heard it and delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. Reuben was the one that did not want to kill Joseph. He did not want Joseph to be their brothers to shed innocent blood, and he tried so hard to prevent these things to happen. And the brothers obviously went ahead of him, and by the time he came to the pit, they have already sold Joseph. But his whole his all his intentions were good concerning Joseph. He wanted to rescue them, rescue Joseph out of his brother's hand, and all of his brothers were bloodthirsty men, and he wanted to rescue them, rescue Joseph out of their hands, and then send Joseph back to his father. But but these people were going to kill Joseph. Their whole intention was to kill Joseph, and selling him to slavery to Egypt was an alternative. That's one of but these were bloody men. They wanted to slay Joseph because of jealousy. And the law of God is still resonating with the brothers, and also it's also resonating to us today, because God said in his law in Genesis 9 verses 5, it says, "And surely your blood for your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require. At the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man." See, these brothers knew that God had said about what God has said about killing another man, and they basically thought it was their time for judgment. And God said, if you kill a man, you will pay for it. You will pay with it for your own blood, and that's the law of God. That is, whoever sheds man's blood, and they say whoever sheds man's blood will soon die in the hands of man. You see, that's the law of God. And if you read on in the scriptures, even throughout scriptures, every man that shedding a man's blood is required. You see, for example, Solomon said to Joab was one of the chief captain in David's army. See, he was general in David's army, and this is what Solomon said concerning him in 1 King 2 verses 32. He says, "And the Lord shall return his blood upon his own head, who fell upon two men more righteous and better than he, and slew them with the sword, my father David, knowing therefore to wit, Abner the son of Ner, captain of the host of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, captain of the host of Judah." And this man, he slayed innocent blood, just because he wanted to, he got carried away here. And this is Joab. Solomon speaking to Joab, speaking about Joab. So this is God's, capital punishment for bloody men is that whoever sheds another man's blood, and another man will, the blood be required. You see, another man will will shed his blood. You see, and this law still stands today. You see, blood for blood. And even today, the brothers knew it was for their time to pay. And, one of the things my spiritual, mentor used to say, Dr. J. Vernon McGee, is, God's capital punishment is a gift to mankind. And God is to prevent bloodshed. But Joseph did not die here. Joseph was sold to a slave, and he was a slave, sold to a slave in Egypt. And the brothers uncovered their sins, and so they uncovered their sins by confessing to one another concerning what had happened. And so the healing of Joseph here starts, and Joseph is hearing them speaking about this, and his healing is starting now. So, and it says here, "And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter." Now they knew not, and even though, he understood what they are saying in Hebrew, because they were speaking in Hebrew, because Joseph had an interpreter. And then that's one of the another reasons that they could not recognize Joseph, because also he had an interpreter, because they say, okay, after all, this is not Joseph. He doesn't know our language. And he says it is because he had this interpreter with him. And that can be a confusing thing when somebody has an interpreter. You assume that that person does not understand what you're saying, or that person is not from your tribe or your homeland. And then here in verse 24 it says, and he turned, speaking of Joseph, he turned himself about from them and wept, and returned to them again and communed with them, and took from them Simeon and bowed him before their eyes. Now Joseph here is tears. Tears is of, he couldn't hold it, because he have heard what these people are saying, the confession of his brothers. And that's what the main thing here, confession. Confession starts with healing and restoration. Now, this was tears of mercy and forgiveness. And he took Simeon now and he bound him before their eyes. And then it says, and then Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn, and restore every man's money into his sack, and to give them provision for the way, and thus did he unto them. Now, you see, now he's showing mercy to them, and he's restoring everything to them. He filled their sacks with corn, and gave them provision for the journey. And it says that love covers all multitude of sins. This man is still looking out for his brothers, despite all this evil that happened to him. And, he restored their money. See, Joseph here demonstrated a godlike character. And Joseph is the picture of Christ, you see, concerning our enemies. Joseph is like a type of Christ. He shows the picture of Christ here. In Matthew 5:44 it says, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, and do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. See, this is the forgiveness. We have to forgive our enemies. We have to do good to our enemies and love our enemies despite their evil ways. So this man is demonstrating a godlike character here. And also in Romans 12 verses 17 it says, recompense to no man evil for evil, provide things honest in the sight of all men. Therefore, if thy enemy is hungry, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Do not overcome evil, but overcome evil with good. Now this Joseph overcame evil with good, and we're going to see more of Joseph's character here, but he demonstrated a Christ-like character here by treating his brothers rather than treating them with contempt. He gave them, on the contrary, love, and gave them forgiveness and mercy. And then it says in verse 26, and they laid their asses with the corn, and departed thence. In verse 27 it says, and as one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender in the inn, he espied his money, for behold, it was in the sack's mouth. And he said unto his brethren, my money is restored, and lo, it is given in my sack. And their heart failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God hath done unto us? Now these men are now, despite all the graces Joseph has given them, despite the graces, these men are still filled with guilt. And, they are filled with guilt because of what they did in the past. And as they left, you see, they couldn't recognize the kindness of Joseph. And these men are now questioning themselves and, having this dialogue with themselves. And then in verse 29, it says, and they came unto Jacob, their father, unto the land of Canaan, and told him all that befell upon them, saying, The man who is the Lord of the land spake roughly to us and took us for spies of the country. And he said and we said unto him, we be brethren, we be 12 brethren, sons of our father. One is not, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. We are true men, we are no spies. And the man, the Lord of the country, said unto us, hereby shall I know that ye are true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food for the famine of your households, and be gone, and bring your youngest brother unto me. Then shall I know that ye are not spies, but that ye are true men. So will I deliver your brother, and shall traffic in the land. And ye shall traffic in the land. See, they tell Jacob the whole story about their journey, and the story of their journey, and what has happened, what has transpired about them and Joseph. And Joseph was very reluctant. He's not going to let go of Simeon until they return back with Benjamin. And now, continue on. He says in verse 35, and it came to pass as they emptied their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. They are afraid of kindness here. And again, these men are filled with guilt. This is guilt ridden. And they couldn't understand real kindness and real love here. God is kind even when we are yet in our sinners. God is a kind God. And God gives us, tender mercies despite our faults. And Joseph is giving his brothers mercy. And then it says in verse 36, and Jacob their father said unto them, me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and ye will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. Now, here is the condition of Jacob. Now, he's engulfed with self-pity. This man is filled with self-pity now, and things that have happened to him in the past, he's now holding on, and he's just completely lost faith of his brothers, of his sons, and he's just completely afraid that he might lose Benjamin, and so he's holding on to this young boy. And he says in verse 37, and Reuben spoke unto his father, saying, slay my 2 sons, if I bring him not to thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. See, now Reuben stands up and take a pledge and say that if I don't bring him, kill my 2 sons. And that's pretty drastic. But now he's saying that, because this is urgent, and he wants to make sure that his father can trust him. So now he's lifting up his 2 sons down and says, I will bring him. He said, I'll promise that I will bring him. And, if I don't bring him, you can take my 2 sons. But here it says in verse 38, it says, and he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which we go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. You see, now Jacob still, despite all these presentation about Reuben saying that he will slay his 2 sons, or even making an oath about his 2 sons, and still Jacob refused to send Benjamin. And he did not regard his own other sons as brother to Benjamin. You see, he did not regard them as brother to Benjamin. He says, for his brother is dead, meaning Joseph. Now this man is fearing a lot of loss, despite Simeon being held in Egypt. You see, Jacob all along cared only for Rachel's children. See, he cared only for Rachel's children, and he this is what he was holding on to. He was first, you know, endowing all his love to Joseph, and now he's giving all his attention to Benjamin, and these are Rachel's sons. And here he neglects even the one, Simeon, that is being held in Egypt. See, this is what brings out the Joseph's brothers' jealousy to begin with, because he favored Joseph heavily than all his brothers, and now he's favoring Benjamin over Simeon. See, he's saying that I don't care. They can keep Simeon there, but I'm holding on to Benjamin. If anything happens to Benjamin, I'm done. I'm finished. See, that's this heart of Jacob, by showing favoritism, brings about a lot of division in this household. But again, here we're going to continue on later on. We're going to see how God makes all these things possible and brings about healing in everything. So we're going to continue on in Genesis chapter 43. But until then, precious saints, God bless.